Hey guys, it's Fook. It's Monday, Labor Day. It's about 11:30, and I'm going to show you guys how to do a 360 air panorama with a Phantom 3 Professional. So here we go. We're going to take off. All right, I'm about 35 meters off the ground at this point, and everything looks pretty good to me. So I'm going to start the process and pretty much show you guys how to do this. So in order to shoot the panorama, we're going to take about 26 photos, and I'm using the Litchi app to automate the process. You can do it manually, but we're going to use Litchi and get it automated, take the photos for us, and then go back to the computer and stitch it up. So right now I'm in FPV mode by default, but we're going to go ahead and start the process and switch over to Pano mode. So here's how you start. First off, you touch the FPV icon in the upper left. You select Pano mode, and you will be in the panorama shooting mode. Next is to go into your settings, which is the little blue gear icon on the lower left side. And here you can set up how many rows of photos you want to take and how many photos per row. I use the 3 rows of 8 photos each, so it's going to take 24 plus 2 more to kind of help orient it. Okay. Once you've done your settings, and you can change this if you like, but I found that this works very well for me. Once you dial in your settings, go ahead and switch on your controller from the P to the F position, and then hit the yellow Start 26 Photos button. You're going to get a warning, and we're going to hit OK. At this point, Litchi is going to take over. You can see that on the top it changes over to Navi, and it's got full control of the drone right now. And it's going to go ahead and take 26 photos. And at this point, you don't have to do anything. So there's the first one. And it'll just keep rotating. It'll control the gimbal, and it'll go ahead and take the photos. And then once we're back at the computer, I can download them, do my processing, and I'll show you that as well. And then we'll stitch them together using a program that I really like, and I'll share that as well. So right now we're at about 35 meters, which is maybe about 80 feet off the ground. I'm actually not that high up. I'm right above an area that people can't even get into at the cross, so that if anything happens, it won't hit anybody. And we're low enough that we're going to avoid any planes, helicopters, because they would never fly 80 feet off the ground. So right now you can see that we've taken about 8 photos, and it's under automated control from the controller and the app. Okay? And just as a point of reference, I took off with about 94% battery life. And during this flight, where it's taking about 26 photos, it's going to go pretty quick. You're probably going to eat up about 10% of your battery life. So on a full charge, you can take safely maybe 6 to 8 photos. It all depends on your comfort level and how quickly you can do the setup of the program. So basically, you want to select where you want to do the shoot, launch from there straight up, get to the right height that you're interested in, and have it go. So I'm actually standing underneath a tree here right next to the cross, so I don't know if the drone's going to capture me or not, but we're going to see. It's kind of turning down and looking down right now, so it's probably going to miss me, but that's okay. We're almost done at 18 photos out of 26. My wife's sitting patiently waiting as I play with my toy. But once it's done, I'll turn it back to P, bring it in for a landing, and we'll take it back and do the editing back at home on the computer, and we'll see how it goes. All right. So almost done here with 21 photos taken. And I'm at 83% battery, so that's 11%. So like I said, maybe about 6 photos. That gives you 66. 40% down, so you'll have about 35 left at the end. So here we go, taking the last two, 25 and 26. And we are done. So, time to land the drone, take it back, and do some processing. You can see on the screen there it says panorama ended. I'm going to switch to P mode, and I'll bring it in for a landing. Hey guys, it's Fook, and we are back in the studio. And I've loaded all of my photos that I've taken from that Mount Helix test shot into Lightroom. And I've made my standard edits, which are basically to bring out the shadows, to increase the contrast a bit, reduce the highlights, and increase the vibrancy and clarity. Okay, so I've done all of that, and I've actually exported this set of 26 photos right here. Okay, I'm not going to go through that whole process, it's going to waste time, but I did that, and what I have are these right here. So these are the 26. They are exported one by one, and what I'm going to do now, and you can just see that it's taking it all the way around at different elevations. What I'm going to do now is stitch them together, and there are several ways you can do this. You can go about it manually. You can try to do it, you know, one photo at a time or a couple of them in Photoshop, tweak it, warp it. You can download Microsoft ICE program, which is an image composite editor or something like that. It's free, and you can play around with it, and it does a pretty good job, but it does require more work. You can use one of the many panorama stitching software out there that you might have to pay for, but it does most of the work for you. So I'm actually going to go that route, and I'm going to use Autopano Giga, which is from a company called Color, which is now actually a part of GoPro. So they bought out Color for this technology for kind of their GoPro 360 cameras at some point. I know that it's a GoPro company. I don't know about the camera bit. The Autopano Giga version is like 220 bucks, something like that. There's an Autopano Pro, which works just as well, and I think it's like 110, half the price. So pick the one that you want to use. The Giga is certainly the more powerful, has more features and things like that, but you may not need it at all. So let's actually go into the stitching, and then I'll walk you through kind of the other considerations you have to do. So first thing first, we will load our images. So I'm going to go ahead and select the 26 images I have, and it brings them in very quickly. Now, the one thing that I'm going to do, and you should look for this in your own stitching program if you're not using Autopano, is to change the projection. Because what happens is that with a drone panorama, even though you're doing 360 from, you know, horizontal straight out down to the ground, the one bit that it can't do is anything above the drone, just because the camera is mounted below it and there's just no physical way. Okay, what your stitching software will want to do is kind of restrict the panorama to just the content that it has, which will make it problematic later for when you want to add a sky or things like that, because the metadata will be all screwed up when you edit it in Photoshop. Okay, so this step is critical if you want to make a true 360 spherical panorama. If you're fine with doing kind of a cylindrical one or kind of a half sphere, then you don't have to do this. So let me show you what I mean, and I'll give you an example too. In Autopano, you would go to Group Settings, you go to the Panorama tab, and by default, the crop is to crop it to the contents of the panorama. I'm going to change that to maximum projection range, okay? And that will basically give it a 360 sphere. And I'm going to click OK. And the next step is to click this little green detect button. Looks like, you know, play media. And basically what that does is it goes through your images, it finds the common points where they line up, and then it gives you a preliminary kind of stitch. Okay, it does some things while it's detecting it. It kind of like you know, removes lens distortion, blends the color really well, and things like that. But now comes the important part, which is rendering this into a JPEG file. So to render it, after you detect the scene, you click the gear where it says render panorama, and you get this options screen. Now, what I'm going to do ultimately is that I'm going to upload this to Google Photos and Facebook. Facebook can support a pretty large panorama. They used to have it, smaller, but now they can take it quite large. Google Photos, on the other hand, has a problem with images this size, which comes out of the Phantom 3 Professional when you're shooting the 26 shots and stitching it together. It's about 15,500 something by 7,700 something. For some reason, it's too big for Google Photos. I think the max on Google Photos may be 100 megapixels. I'm not entirely sure. What I do know is that if you reduce this to 12,000 by 600, it will upload just fine to both Google Photos and Facebook. So if we change this to 12,000, the height will automatically scale to 6,000, and you can see that it drops down to 72 megapixels. I'm going to play around with the parameters a bit just to see if it's really, under 100 is what works for Google Photos. But for the tutorial, I'm just going to leave it at 12,000 by 6,000, which is pretty high resolution. You can also change the compression. I'm going to leave it at 11. Pretty darn high, but it's fine. When you're exporting the data, you want to make sure that you export the panorama. That should be by default. And then the next thing to do is just to browse to where you have your photos, which for me is in my pictures library in the export folder, and I'm going to select that. And I'm going to give this a name. So I'm going to call this Mount Helix, because this is where we shot it, 360-degree panorama. Mount Helix is just a little mountain in La Mesa, California. It's about 10 miles east of San Diego. That's got this cross. So if you live in the area, you know what Mount Helix is. But if you're watching this from somewhere else, you may be thinking, what the heck is he talking about? So at this point, after we've selected our folder, give it a file name, I'm just going to click render and let Autopano do its thing. So if you're watching the status here, you can see that it goes through and does an anti-ghosting and a bunch of other things as it's rendering the images into a panorama. It warps them, it makes sure that everything lines up, blends really well, and basically it does its thing. While it does that, let me show you what the panorama looks like if you don't select maximum projection. So this is it right here. It's from a couple of days ago. I'm just getting around to editing it, but I did the preliminary one. So if I click on this, it enters into panorama mode, and for the most part it looks fine. You can scroll around, you can look straight down, there's the cross, and you can kind of spin around. Okay, that ding coincidentally is Autopano telling me it's done. So this is basically the whole 360 panorama, and it actually looks pretty darn good as it is. One tiny little issue. If I look above, it's all black because there's nothing up there, right? So this is kind of a partial 360 panorama. It's not quite cylindrical because you do get the underneath view. So it's like a half spherical, I guess. If you upload this to Facebook, it will automatically fill in the black with blue. So it makes it look like it's full sky, which is actually kind of nice. But Google Photos and other viewers won't do that. So we will have to fix that. So let me get out of here. So now that the panel is rendered, you can see that it's checked. I'll go into Photoshop and load up my image. So let me browse to the correct directory here. And what do we call it? 360? This is it right here. All right. So this is what we get. This is a zoomed out 12,000 by 6,000 megapixel, sorry, 12,000 by 6,000 pixels panorama. And it is 360, but if we kind of view this, we'll get that black circle above. So at this point, you can bring in a separate sky that's similar. You can resize it to fit this photo. You can do a layer mask and blend it all together and make it look really nice with, you know, the wisp of clouds and everything like that. And it does look really nice, but we don't have time. So I'm going to show you a quick and dirty trick that is good enough, basically. Okay, so what we want to do is we just want to select as much of the sky as possible. So just miss the mountain there. And right up to the lowest point of black that you can find. So I'm going to get right about here. And then the next thing to do is to go and free transform this to fill the black area. Two ways to do this. You can either go to Edit and Free Transform, or you can press Ctrl T on a PC, the keyboard shortcut. Grab the handle here and drag it all the way to the top. And then you simply hit Enter. What that does is it took that little strip of sky that's down here, and it kind of just stretches it. It scales it to fill. If it's a perfectly blue sky, or kind of has wispy clouds like this, works fine. Most people will not even notice that this is the trick that you did. If it's a more complex sky, they'll know. So you'll want to take the time to kind of find the right sky that has the same colors, cloud texture, and kind of blend it in. But for this is good enough. Now, here's the key. Once you've done this, you just want to simply save this image. Okay, so I'm going to hit Control S. Photoshop may ask me for a JPEG quality option, and I'm going to say 8. 8's fine. We started with 11, but out of Autopano, but we don't have to keep that. Let's do 8. Keep it reasonable. The reason you want to do save or save as is that metadata that Autopano had put into the image to define it as a 360 spherical panorama will be preserved if you do that. If you do an export or save to a different format or do some other crazy edits like change the size of the image or the canvas size, when Photoshop goes to save it, it's going to lose that metadata. So it's important not to change the canvas size or the image size. Just make your edits on the photo as is. If you're bringing in something, you can. Just make sure that you're not changing that canvas size, and then do a save to preserve that metadata. So now that we're done, go back out, go find that new image, and I'm going to delete this test. I don't really need it, but this is the one. So you can see that one next to it, I call it No Sky Above. It's basically the half circle. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go to Google Photos and just upload this image and take a look at it. Okay. While it's uploading, I'm going to let you see some of my other photos that I kind of have on here. I've been playing around with my Samsung Gear 360, which is a ground-based 360 panorama camera that takes 2 kind of spherical fisheye shots in one go, and then the software stitches it together. And I'm going to try to show you what this looks like. And because I'm uploading photos, it's acting up because it's trying to download the image, which is quite large. So let me kind of exit out of here and come back in. Go to Photos. Wow, not quite sure how it ended up with those photos, but let me go ahead and refresh. It must have thought that I clicked on something and was scrolling or something, and it scrolled through my timeline. But still taking much longer than I would have liked. So maybe I won't show this, and we'll just exit out. Let's go find that panorama I just uploaded. It should be down here, and I think this is it right here. If I click on this, and this one is rendering properly. So here we go. So you can see again, it's 360. There's my cross. I'm standing right about here under the tree. This is other folks. But as you can see, when I scroll around, and Google Photos has to download it completely, it looks great. And even if I look up, it looks pretty decent. Sky's there, and it just looks fine. Coincidentally, this is kind of what Facebook will do for you automatically if you upload that kind of half sphere. Okay, so that's kind of the quick and dirty way to make a aerial panorama into a 360 spherical. Okay, I'm still bothered by why this is not working, so let me go ahead and try a different one. And this one's working. Maybe my internet connection was pooping out. But anyways, this is the Samsung Gear 360 from the ground. And these images are pretty good, and especially through the Gear VR, looks pretty awesome. So anyways, if you like the video and like the technique, give me a thumbs up and check back here occasionally. I'll have more tutorials and other videos up for you guys to look at. All right, thanks, and I'll talk to you later.